Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is a Ukraine war news update, the second part thereof for the 20th of June 2025. I'm going to start with a bit of Kaja Kallas, why not? And as Shashank Joshi from The Economist says, curious what intelligence Germany has that is leading it to this conclusion. The conclusion being we are very certain, and we have intelligence evidence for this, that Ukraine is just a step on the path to the West. That meaning that Russia's first step to the West is Ukraine, and that they will go further. So EU's top diplomat, and this is from the Associated Press, warns that Russia has a plan for long-term aggression against Europe. We're actually going to dip into this article. Russia poses a direct threat to the European Union through acts of sabotage and cyber attacks, but its massive military spending suggests that President Putin also plans to use his armed forces elsewhere in the future. The EU's top diplomat warned on Wednesday, quote, Russia is already a direct threat to the European Union, said Kaja Kallas, listing a series of Russian airspace violations, provocative military exercises and attacks on energy grids, pipelines and undersea cables. Kallas noted that Russia is already spending more on defence than the EU's 27 nations combined, and this year will invest more, quote, on defence than its own healthcare, education and social policy combined. This is a long-term plan for a long-term aggression. You don't spend that much on the military if you don't plan on using it, she said to lawmakers in Strasbourg, EU lawmakers. Europe is under attack and our continent sits in a world becoming more dangerous, as she added. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte has said that Russia is producing as much weapons and ammunition in 3 months as the 32 allies together to make in a year. He believes that Russia could be in a position to launch an attack on a NATO ally by the end of the decade. The acts of sabotage and cyber attacks are mostly aimed at undermining European support for Ukraine, military officers and experts have said. But concern is mounting in Europe that Russia could try to test NATO's Article 5 security guarantee, the pledge that an attack on any one of the allies would be met with a collective response from all 32. In 2021, NATO allies acknowledged that significant and cumulative cyber attacks might, in certain circumstances, be also considered an armed attack that could lead them to invoke Article 5, but so far no action has been taken. That's something I talked about a lot. Is what's the threshold for war? Essentially, we are being attacked, information war, cyber war. They have dismantled a hospital information network, for example, and we already know that cyber attacked hospitals have a higher mortality rate than a normal functioning hospital. In other words, cyber attacking a hospital kills people. So if we have, and the French have had this, hospitals that have been cyber attacked by Russia, and there's information warfare going on, does that not constitute an attack by Russia? Why is it that only a tank crossing a border, or a fighter or a jet bombing a city? Why is only that war? Why is cyber warfare not war? Why is information warfare not war? There is some kind of odd dividing line there that I think needs to be looked at, and this is kind of what the article is speaking to. With the Trump administration now turning its sights on security challenges in the Middle East and China, Europe has been left to fend for itself and for Ukraine, and finds itself in a more precarious position. Last week, the head of Germany's foreign intelligence, BND, Bruno Kahl, warned against underestimating Russian intentions toward the West and NATO. Quote, we are very certain, and we have intelligence evidence for this, that Ukraine is just a step on the path to the West. Carl told the Table Today podcast on June 9th, according to German news agency DPA. Russia's goal is to expand its sphere of influence westwards, the BND chief said. They want to catapult NATO back to the state it was at the end of the 1990s. They want to kick America out of Europe, and they use any means to achieve that. He warned that this must be nipped in the bud, and that deterrence is the most bloodless way to prevent war. NATO countries are set to agree a new defence investment pledge at a summit in the Netherlands next week, pouring billions of dollars into a security-related spending. We're going to return to that NATO summit because the US, or in fact, it's probably good to talk about this now. The United States is pressuring European allies to limit references to Ukraine. It did this, my goodness, it's done this at the G7. It's done this pretty much everywhere it can to try, and any kind of meeting that involves the US. In fact, previous a NATO meeting, this was done. The UN, they've done this. The United States is pressuring European allies to limit references to Ukraine in a final communique coming out of the week's NATO summit, according to several sources. A symbolic move that would signal a decline in support for Kyiv under US President Donald Trump's administration. This is Vladimir Putin succeeding in his goal. He's infiltrated NATO now. NATO are not being strong against Russia. It's the main reason NATO exists is Russia, and Russia have succeeded in getting through its proxy, the United States, a change in NATO. In this case, changing NATO language, potentially a change in their direction of travel. The US is pressuring European allies to stop talking about Russia's crimes in Ukraine, while Russia is intensifying its massacre of civilians. It's utterly insane, says this source. Countries that have the power to stop genocide, but choose to look away, are almost as guilty as those committing it. And that excerpt that you can see was from Newsweek, talking about how the United States has pressured European allies to change that communique. Now, we also hear, quote here, that Putin has received an invitation to the G20 summit in Johannesburg in November, said Ambassador at Large of the Foreign Ministry Berdiev. According to him, the decision will be made by the president himself, but it's possible that Russia will again be represented by Sergei Lavrov. So, of course, there are two things going on here. One, what the hell is Putin... Why the hell is he being invited to the G20? Like, are we just given up on being hard on Russia because, a couple of years has passed? Oh, well, the moral evaluation is no different 3 years later than it was then, considering Russia's not changed its approach at all. And is, in fact, attacking even more presently with drones and missiles. So, there's no change in morality here, but everyone's like, oh, well, 3 years is enough time to get... I'm bored of being harsh on Russia now. 3 years is enough. Let's let them back in the G20. Whoop, whoop. It's despicable. And there is this issue, of course, whether, as a signatory to the Rome Statute, South Africa will be... it will be obliged to arrest Vladimir Putin, but whether it will or not. And that kind of undermines the whole Rome Statute, doesn't it? The International Criminal Court's sign up, if you like. So he has an arrest warrant on his head, and that obliges any state that has signed up to the Rome Statute to arrest anyone who has an International Criminal Court arrest warrant. Anton Gerashenko now, and I have reported this, but there's just a little bit more on it. It reports how Spiegel is talking about this EU diplomat who was beaten up in Vladivostok. So a representative of the European Union from Romania was reportedly attacked in the Russian city of Vladivostok on May the 26th, where she was on an official business trip. According to Der Spiegel, the attackers might have been the Federal Security Service agents, FSB agents. According to the publication, around 7 in the morning, she went out for a walk when a car stopped next to her. Two men got out of the vehicle, threatened her, and then beat her up. The men were believed to work for Russian security authorities, the news magazine said, citing EU diplomatic sources. The European Commission confirmed the incident and stated that an investigation is underway. Russia's representative in Brussels was summoned for clarifications. That's absolutely shocking, isn't it? Denmark will push for Ukraine's EU membership during its presidency of the EU Council, so they're taking on the rotating EU presidency after Poland, said the country's Minister for European Affairs, quote, unfortunately, Hungary is blocking Ukraine's membership in the EU, and we are doing everything we can to apply pressure. So well done, Denmark. Hungary, well, actually, we'll talk about Hungary now. So I talked yesterday about how Orban is in trouble with Poles, and there was talk about a 15% difference between his party, Fidesz, and Tizia, the opposition party under Peter Magyar. But I was saying I didn't know what poll that was because it wasn't on the poll of polls on Politico. Now we have that important context. While independent polls show... Well, no, okay, first of all, let's go to the poll. So another bombshell poll from Hungary. Peter Magyar's opposition Tizia party leads Orban's Fidesz KDNP 51 to 36. That's a 15-point gap. Under Orban's own gerrymandered system, this could mean a 2/3 majority for Tizia. Poll by Median, Hungary's most trusted pollster for HVG. So that's pretty incredible there. And there are the details of the poll. And... then there's a response here from Szabolcs Panyi, who's done a pretty blockbuster documentary against Orban and his corruption. But he said, important context, while independent polls show Hungary's opposition Tizia party clearly ahead of Viktor Orban's Fidesz, as you've just seen, pro-government pollsters like Nezapont have gone silent. 15 polls published by pro-government pollsters. There were 15 polls in June 2024. We're now in June 2025, and there's only been one so far. What is going on? Those government pollsters are keeping silent. And of course, you can imagine they're keeping silent because that's deeply uncomfortable what they're finding out, that Fidesz are in a lot of trouble in the polls, and that's good news for Ukraine, good news for Europe. Baltics, Nordics and Poland propose Schengen ban for Russians who fought in Ukraine. Quote, there are hundreds of thousands of Russian citizens who have fought against Ukraine, said Estonian Interior Minister. We must take a clear stance. These individuals cannot freely travel across Schengen. This is the idea that if you get into the Schengen area, then you're free to go all around the Schengen area, because there aren't really any border control places. So it's like essentially banning Russians who have fought in a war from Europe, really, as how I would understand that. Sounds good to me. Latvia bans property purchases by Russian and Belarusian citizens. With the new law targets individuals and companies from both countries with few exceptions. Lawmakers cite Russia's hybrid war tactics as a reason to block foreign influence through real estate. And that, again, sounds good news to me. Now, there's news that pro-Palestinian activists broke into the UK's largest RAF base, RAF Brize Norton. I mean, it's insane that they've been able to do this. Arriving on electric scooters. Once inside, they damaged 2 Airbus Voyager refueling aircraft by spraying red paint into the engines using repurposed fire extinguishers and further damaging the planes with crowbars. I mean, this could render them completely inoperational. That is terrible. The fact that the intruders were able to so easily breach an airbase and get close to high-value military equipment raises serious questions about security protocols. Absolutely it does, says Special Carlson. It's well known that in Europe, Russian agents have been recruited to carry out acts of sabotage. If someone with more dangerous intentions and equipment more serious than just a paint-filled fire extinguisher had gained access just as easily, the outcome could have been far more damaging. I mean, this is deeply embarrassing. Terrible. Now, Russians have hoisted a flag of the Taliban, a movement recognised as terrorist, in St. Petersburg at the Economic Forum there. I mean, gee whiz, they are getting into bed with all of the wrongers around the world. Now, Chief Rabbi of Ukraine, Moshe Azman here, posts a video, and I have actually posted this video before. I haven't watched the full lot here, but you've got Pastor Mark Burns, who is one of these kind of pastors to the president, and he was previously swallowing the MAGA line concerning Ukraine. Then he went to Ukraine, visited, and he completely changed his mind. He realised, the cataracts, if you like, fell from his eyes. The scales fell from his eyes, and he realised what the truth was. President Donald Trump's personal spiritual advisor, Pastor Mark Burns, gives a very powerful speech about how he was wrong about the war in Ukraine because of propaganda, and how his eyes were opened after a visit to Ukraine. Now Mr. Burns is a passionate friend of Ukraine and is doing a very important and difficult job. He is trying to open the eyes of other key figures in the US government. Thank you very much to Pastor Mark Burns. May the Almighty help open the eyes of the world, and may this lead to decisive action. Well, yeah, I broadly agree with that idea. So this is exactly what you need. People in that kind of MAGA ecosystem to be fervent defenders of Ukraine and to try and bring those alongside them to the truth of the matter. So well done, Pastor Mark Burns there, talking about how he was sinking that MAGA propaganda. Now, what do we have? Timothy Milovanov. So this is an interesting one. You've seen the absolute car crash of an interview of Ted Cruz by Tucker Carlson. It was at points hilarious and at others cringeworthy. I mean, you're kind of nodding your head with Tucker Carlson here. Now, I think some of the lines of argument weren't particularly as powerful as some are thinking. I talked about this yesterday, that the idea that because Ted Cruz doesn't know the population or number of Iran, that he can't know that Iran are doing bad things. It's things like that maybe are a bit cheap. But this is good from Ted Cruz back to Tucker Carlson here.
Material effect that helped the United States. Russia is backstopped by China, and I recommend that you go there and see it. It is way nicer than Washington, D.C.
So he's saying Russia is way nicer than Washington, D.C.
Way nicer.
I don't understand. For some reason, you are really invested in defending Russia, and I don't get that. I'm not attacking you with that. I'm genuinely, I don't get why you're so passionate about defending Russia.
I mean, hilarious. Actually, we need to know that. We need to know how much money you are taking from Russia. That laugh tells me pretty much all I need to know. How are you so freaking compromised? That's what I want to know, because he is compromised. Tucker Carlson is compromised by Russia, and that needs investigating. Anyway, lots more in that interview, but that particular question, that's what I want to know. Right, now we're hearing that, and we had heard rumours of this, the White House government websites have removed all reference to the signing of the Budapest Memorandum. So it didn't happen. Prove it happened. It's not there. It didn't happen. We're not contractually obliged to offer security support to Ukraine. It's not on the website anymore. As Jürgen Naudert says, Ukraine didn't give up its third largest nuclear arsenal in the world for a piece of paper, but simply because one of the guarantees wiped his ass with that piece of paper and the other cowards deleted it. I mean, that's pretty harsh rhetoric there, but I don't know if this is indicative of something, that it represents something bigger, but they have removed reference to the Budapest Memorandum from the White House website. Absolutely extraordinary. We've already talked about how the US wants to change the rhetoric of the NATO communique. That is extraordinary as well. Now, the Kremlin spokesperson has said, we have a strategic advantage. Why lose it? We're advancing deeper into Ukraine and we'll keep going. We don't need a ceasefire. So Russia is telling the world it is doing fine, thank you very much, and doesn't want a ceasefire. Meanwhile, Trump is saying Russia wants peace. I'm sure of it. Trump is asserting that Russia wants peace. Russia is telling you overtly, explicitly, that they don't want peace at the moment. I mean, they got a strategic advantage. They're advancing and want to continue doing so. Absolutely incredible. Now, I just thought I'd throw this one in here. Another bit of classic Trump rhetoric.
They told me, as an example, I said to them, was there any sign of love? You were there, 10 people. It's only 10, but it's pretty representative. Did the Hamas show any signs of, like, help or liking you? Did they wink at you? Did they give you a piece of bread extra? Did they give you a meal on the side, like, you think of doing? Like what happened in Germany, what happened elsewhere. People would try and help people.
Just what a weird thing to say. Did they treat their prisoners nicely? Like they did in Germany, Nazi Germany. They treat the Jews nicely. Give them extra bread and stuff. What are you talking about? Incredible stuff. Anyway, taco. So Trump always chickens out. Do we see another taco moment in Canada? So the Financial Times is at the moment reporting that Trump walked out of the G7 meeting early to avoid Zelenskyy, and also because President Macron had annoyed him. There's quite a few memes about this now. So there's a lot more information coming out about why Trump left early. NATO's shortened the Hague summit to try and stop man-baby running away, to try and stop, actually potentially could be stopping a meeting between Zelenskyy and Trump, although they are slated for a meal now. The quote is, his decision to leave was partly due to the irritation at French President Emmanuel Macron, who had stopped in Greenland, and I reported this, and opposed Trump's plans to take control of the island, as well as the US president's lack of interest in meeting the Ukrainian leader. So don't want to meet Zelenskyy, annoyed with Macron because he had defended Greenland and its sovereignty over and above American imperialism. So that annoyed Trump, and he did a runner. So there you go. It emerged that Trump had little interest in a meeting with the Ukrainian president. Yeah. And then, of course, we know that Trump on the way home sent out that tweet slagging off Macron. Now, this might need a little bit of looking into. So I was going to do this just as a separate kind of part of my US politics, Captain Chaos, what's going on over there type video. Now, the Trump's EPA, that's Environmental Protections Agency, which, as we knew from Trump 1.0, when he put Scott Pruitt in charge, it's like putting the fox in charge of the hen house. He gets people into the EPA who are known like fossil fuel people, or people whose intention is to destroy the environment. That's who he puts in charge of the EPA. Here we have Trump's EPA intends to reverse a ban on asbestos, a carcinogen that causes disease and death from exposure. I know someone that's died of asbestosis. It's horrible, right? Trump's EPA intends to reverse the ban. So you think that's bad enough as a batshit crazy idea? Then we hear that Russia is currently the world's top asbestos exporter. Asbestos is linked to 40,000 annual deaths from cancers like mesothelioma. Trump wants to reverse the ban on asbestos. Russia is currently the world's top asbestos exporter. Could it be? Could it be? Incredible. Now, in Hungary, Imagine Dragons, so for those who don't exist in modern life, they are a pretty big pop rock band. They were told not to display the Ukrainian flag. Now, they've been famous for displaying the Ukrainian flag on stage and being real supporters, strong supporters of Ukraine. So instead, they released confetti in the colours of the flag and filled the stage with blue and yellow smoke. The guitarist also didn't forget to wear a blue shirt that perfectly matched his yellow guitar. Respect to the band. And as for the Hungarians, well, they keep finding new lows. So here we have Imagine. So he's, as I said, real strong supporter of Ukraine. So they did it with confetti instead. I don't know if we've got a picture of the guitarist here. I don't think we have, unfortunately. But he was obviously sporting very pro-Ukrainian colours. So that's fantastic. Israel is reluctant to accept Russia's mediation in war with Iran, Kremlin says. So Kremlin were positioning themselves to help out with mediation between Iran and Israel. Trump, I think, was broadly up for that, but then he publicly said, well, you need to worry about your own war first, and kind of rebuked Putin. But I think there was previous talk that was quite favourable to that. At the moment, we see reluctance, at least on Israel's part, to resort to mediation or pursue a peaceful resolution. No doo-doo, Sherlock. I mean, honestly, of course, Israel are not going to want Russia to be the mediators. Russia are one of the very few allies of Iran. At the most, you want someone that's completely neutral. Russia are not that country. Is not that country. Right, okay, so that's probably a good segue onto, let's talk a little bit about Iran. And 2 week. Oh my goodness, this is absolutely incredible. 2 week Trump strikes again. It's really interesting listening to Defamon these days. He has become far more critical of Trump as someone who exists, I think, somewhat in that sphere, that kind of Republican sphere. A reporter just called out Trump's pattern of saying 2 weeks anytime he's indecisive and wants to avoid making a tough decision. The media needs to call this out. Everyone needs to see this. So let's go to Caroline Levitt.
That news, I have a message directly from the president, and I quote, "Based on the fact that there's a substantial chance of negotiations that may or may not take place with Iran in the near future, I will make my decision whether or not to go within the next 2 weeks." That's a quote directly from the president for all of you today.
So whether you agree with the US helping out Israel or not, and you already know my position, it's somewhat that I'm not against them doing that as long as it's very precise. In terms of, I would suggest they only used a B-2 bomber to use that bunker buster against Fordow. But even then, there are ideas that weapon is possibly not even able to penetrate into that bunker. So, otherwise it's just intelligence and refueling, that kind of stuff. Whether or not, you're in accordance with that kind of approach, or even if you want the US to go full tilt into support, which I'm against, supporting Israel, then what I think everyone can universally recognise that he's Taco here. So he said, we're going to help, unconditional surrender. It was all like bombastic rhetoric. And then I personally think he's been put under a lot of pressure from the MAGA isolationists like Tucker Carlson, like Charlie, I think Charlie Kirk was involved, and but certainly Steve Bannon, Marjorie Taylor Greene, lots of really stalwart MAGA Republicans going against his more neocon approach there. Now, this hasn't gone unnoticed, the 2 weeks aspect, by journalists. Here's a British journalist asking in the White House.
Caroline, President Trump has said previously in regard to Russia, he's used this phrase about 2 weeks several times in terms of like, we expect like a 2-week deadline and then you give another 2-week deadline. How can we be sure that he's going to stick to this one on making a decision on Iran?
Well, in those deadlines, as you've seen in respect to Russia, Ukraine, might I add, these are two very different, complicated global conflicts, as you know, that the president inherited from our...
These are such different, complicated conflicts that we inherited from Biden. It's all Biden's fault. A, it's Biden's fault. B, there's such different, complicated conflicts that 2 weeks, they're so different. 2 weeks. But they're really like the very 2 weeks. But honestly, the difference between like this one over 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 2 weeks. Oh, I'm too weak. Anyway.
Our previous incompetent president in the weakness of the previous administration. And the president has spent a tremendous amount of time and effort cleaning up these crises that were caused.
I would edit over that. The president spent a tremendous amount of time playing golf.
By the last administration's just complete dereliction of duty on the world stage and American weakness. Now we have American strength again. With respect to...
dereliction of duty is hanging the Ukrainians out to dry. Okay, the reporter to the White House press secretary... The reporter said that, as we heard, the 2 week circus, so no reports here saying the same thing, is just an absolute joke, really. 2 weeks, 2 weeks. John Jackson says, guess what? 2 weeks is plenty of time to hide 900 pounds of highly enriched uranium across a nation that's twice the size of Iraq. So that is giving the argument here from John Jackson is that's giving Iran the chance to be able to evade the ramifications of the US getting involved. It's weak because it's not even it's neither defending international law or diplomacy or all of these arguments against Israel doing what it's doing, nor is it siding with Israel. It's just like, nah. I mean, the idea is he's giving diplomacy a chance and then going hard on supporting Israel would be the implication there. But then just talk about, no, we're going for the diplomatic route. But 2 weeks is just it's just this almost arbitrary, vague sort of, punting it to the long grass. So here is what John Bolton, his former national security advisor, said about this.
I mean, you don't know that I'm going to even do it. You don't know. I may do it. I may not do it. I mean, nobody knows what I'm going to do.
Yes, I don't think he knows what to do as of the moment we speak. And he doesn't like to be in these kinds of situations where he has to make a choice that he can't reverse the next day. He'd much rather have room to maneuver. And he currently believes, I think, that if he threatens the use of force, that this will finally induce the Ayatollahs to be serious about negotiating the end of the nuclear weapons program. He's wrong on that because they're not going to negotiate the end of the program. I think really the Ayatollahs are waiting to see if this is a taco moment. The Trump always chickens out line. And so he's waiting for them and they're waiting for him. Interesting. So that's John Bolton's opinion. Netanyahu said, we've never had a better friend than Trump, and we appreciate every decision he makes. Quote, there are personal costs in war. My son even cancelled a wedding. This has famously been ridiculed for being like, really? What a cost. Wow. What about the people being bombed or so on and so forth. US joining the attacks. It depends on Trump. He knows the game. Netanyahu and killing Khamenei. All options are open. It's better not to talk about it in the media. No one enjoys immunity. But basically, the idea is that he sees Trump as friend number one of Israel, and he's probably got no reason not to, really. Now, Axios reports that Trump wants to ensure three things before attacking Iran. And to be fair, you're going to now see a very rare thing. You're going to see me agree with Trump. Not necessarily on like the 2 weeks thing, but before you do commit to helping Iran, I think you need to, I totally agree with this. So the military strike is truly necessary. Now, necessary depends what your objectives are, right? I've said I sort of 55% agree with
strikes on Iran, and it's nothing to do with Israel. Like, it's irrelevant what Israel have done elsewhere. And like, for me, this whole thing is about the destruction of nuclear capability in the hands of a dictatorship. That's what I don't want to happen. So whether it's the US doing it or Israel doing it or whatever, it almost doesn't matter who does it to a significant degree. So it confuses my calculation. And this is a very personal thing for me, of course, and we've been through this before. I don't want to fully relitigate it. But we can confuse matters by thinking, well, Israel's done terrible things over here, so therefore this is terrible. Yeah. For me, this is take out the nuclear capacity and capability. So if it's like a B-2 bomber from the US to be able to do that with a bunker buster, then, you know, is that the only way it can be done? Is it truly necessary that the US does that? Will it drag the US into a prolonged Middle East war? So my idea is you do that, you take out the nuclear capacity and capability, and then you get out Dodge. That's it. Yeah, absolutely, you don't want a prolonged war. And will it actually destroy Iran's nuclear program? That's the key. So if it's not going to do that, then kind of don't get involved. Like, if you're just going to have some planes blowing up some Iranian surface-to-air missile systems, don't do that. I have been quite clear when I have been like umming and ahhing. I'm quite clear on like the US like refueling and intelligence, that kind of support, which is already happening anyway, pretty certainly. And at most, like a bomber to go and drop a big bomb on that nuclear facility. But there are also some interesting environmental arguments against that. Like, that could poison. I don't know enough about the potential environmental impact, but that would be a concern for me. Now, that is sensible from Trump. I think those three ideas are pretty sensible. Now, Adam Kinzinger says, who is in support of supporting Israel to a limit, right? Regardless of your opinion on the Iran strike, Trump is showing a case of chickening out so far. Every time he considers action, he backs. Remember, after Iran attacked US troops, shot down $200 million plane, etc., as he always said, talks big but scared to death. It's taco. It's just taco Trump. Trump always chickens out Trump. Makes no sense. It's just taco. Right. Then we have this interesting development, which is, I did a video on Pete Hegseth last night, and then I ended it with how Trump was really angry with Pete Hegseth over the military parade. And we had Pete Hegseth being just woefully underprepared and underqualified for the job of running 3 million people and a budget of $1 trillion. And he's already cocked up aid to Ukraine in misinterpreting what Trump said, stopping aid to Ukraine, then realizing he misinterpreted and turning aid back on. And he's just like, I don't know, he's a child in adult pants or whatever. But the Secretary of Defense, the person in charge of the Pentagon, is being kept out of deliberations on whether to go to war with Iran. This tells you that Pete Hegseth is not a serious appointment. Like, the evidence is there from Trump himself. Like, yeah, do this. I want you there because you're on Fox News and you're super loyal to me. But when it comes to discussing whether we should attack Iran or not, dude, you're just used to talking crap on Fox News. I need someone more serious than you. Well, yeah, but you've got him, and then you sacked the rest. He sacked the rest. You know, those serious military 4-star generals and admirals that he can't replace now because no one wants to do it because he's a numbnut. Well, anyway, that's your expertise. Oh, and by the way, the person in charge of the national intelligence, the director of national intelligence, that's Tulsi Gabbard. She's a complete numbnut as well, and she disagrees with you. So what are you going to do, Trump? So it turns out, well, yeah, as it says here, experience matters. This is why you need someone who isn't a Fox News host. This isn't a reality show. So the quote here, Jesse Rodriguez here, Vice President Editorial of Booking for MSNBC, says, quote, nobody is, well, not him. This is an official in the government supposedly saying, quote, nobody is talking to Hegseth. There's no interface operationally between Hegseth and the White House at all. It's one thing to order strikes on the Houthis, and by the way, that was all fairly cocked up. They lost loads of drones. They lost 2 Hornets over the side of an aircraft carrier. He was being done for that in congressional hearings, and now he's been sidelined as a fucking Secretary of Defense Who is Trump talking to about this now? Who's advising him? Because he's sidelined the intelligence chief and he's sidelined the DOD chief. The Guardian reports Trump wants to strike Iran only if the US can destroy the Fordo enrichment facility with a bunker bomb. And again, I agree with that. The Pentagon DTRA concluded earlier this year that they don't go deep enough, and totally destroying Fordo requires a tactical nuke. So there have been people saying that actually they might need a tactical nuke to do that. Now we're talking a bit of a problem here. Using a nuke to destroy nukes, this is sounding a little bit too hardcore for me. But because apparently the bunker busters can't actually do the job of getting, and that's why they built that facility as deep as they did, right? So anyway, Rick Wilson, the Lincoln Project chap, former Republican, says, we've seen this movie before. Anthony Scaramucci saying the end of the beginning. Tulsi Gabbard and Pete Hegseth are both being cut out of key decisions by Trump. And that's a report from Mediaite. So, wow, those two being cut out from Trump world. No report says Tulsi Gabbard is losing Trump support, says CNN. Once seen as promising, now many in the White House think she's off message, especially after she blamed war hawks for stoking nuclear tensions. Trump saw it as a direct shot at his Iran policy. I was talking about how that was more pertaining to Ukraine, but others were saying it was actually concerning Iran. Trump saw it as a direct shot at his Iran policy, and the vibes changed fast. So Trump's intel chief Tulsi Gabbard is off message and out of favour, sources tell CNN. Wow, falling apart a little bit. Now, I've talked about this fracture being really important. Could be an insight into what's going on in the GOP as a whole. Well, certainly it could be a fracture between the MAGA GOP and the Reagan GOP, if you like, for want of a better term. But also there's this fracture within the MAGA Republican area between the isolationists, the America Firsts, and the Trumpites. Like, do you put ideology before Trump, or do you put Trump before ideology? And this is what Harry Enton gets excited about, because there is some data to suggest that actually it seems that it's Trump people are getting behind and not ideology. In other words, that Tucker Carlson and Steve Bannon and Marjorie Taylor Greene might actually be not representative of the base.
This is what we should point out. This is Donald Trump's GOP, not Tucker Carlson's. Now, you mentioned what happens when you go against Donald Trump.
Which, by the way, is exactly what I predicted the other day. I said the base are more likely to go Trump's way, irrespective of what he decides on Iran in the end. They will follow him, because I also think that there will be certain MAGA people who would be happy with going USA, USA, and having the US bomb Iran. And it's flexing. That's what I talked about the other day. So let's see if the data bears that out.
I mean, this sort of says it all, right? We've had these fights in the past. We had it between Mike Pence and, of course, Donald Trump over the 2020 election. We had it most recently, Elon Musk against Donald Trump. GOP favorables, pre and post-Trump fight. Look at this. Pre-fight, Mike Pence, very well beloved by Republicans, an 84% favorable rating. Look at where he is now, 36%. When you go against Donald Trump and you're Republican, you go down. How about Elon Musk? Remember, he was beloved by Republicans. He had a 78% favorable rating with Republicans, but then he fought Donald Trump, and what happened? He went down. The bottom line is this: Donald Trump's favorable rating stayed steady, or actually even went up when he won these battles against Mike Pence or Elon Musk. But if you go up against Donald Trump and you're Republican or Republican affiliated, your favorable ratings with Republicans, they go down, traditionally speaking.
Where do things stand right now for the Director of National Intelligence and Tucker Carlson? And again, I want to point out, Carlson's been very public with what he's saying. Tulsi Gabbard, we haven't heard from her in a little bit.
Yeah, this is Donald Trump's Republican Party. The favorable rating among Republicans, you could see it here. Donald Trump beloved, 88% favorable rating among Republicans, near his apex. Now, Tucker Carlson is well liked among Republicans, but not anywhere in the same universe as Donald Trump at 64%, Tulsi Gabbard, 55%. The bottom line is this: as I said at the beginning, this is Donald Trump's Republican Party, not Tucker Carlson's, not Tulsi Gabbard's. Republicans, traditionally speaking, go along with Donald Trump. And as we saw in that last slide, when you go against Donald Trump, you go down while Donald Trump stays quite high.
And we keep on monitoring where Republican support is for the possibility of strikes. What's the latest you're seeing?
Yeah, I mean, look, what we see in the data, you know, and I've looked at a number of different polls. They've asked it different ways.
Remember, this is Republican support for US strikes on Iran.
But the clear majority of Republicans in any poll that you look, GOP on U.S. airstrikes against Iran, if Iran's pursuing nuclear arms, you see it here. The Republican Party, again, is with Donald Trump, 69% in this particular poll from the Chicago Council that was taken a few months ago, compared to 27% who are opposed. But again, even if you look at the...
My personal thought has always been that it's quite odd to have a Republican campaigning on being the president of peace. I know Trump's often talked about this, and I think one of the very few things he's ideologically consistent with is nuclear, actually. He's always been afraid of nukes, right? If you look at his rhetoric and tariffs, like tariffs and nukes. Otherwise, he can say whatever you like. He flip-flops all over the shop. Is he really a president of peace? Does he really like peace? We wanted to go to a war with Iran previously in Trump 1.0 and had to be convinced not to. And there's a whole Soleimani strike death. But he claims he's his president of peace. But I just think that's a front. That's just a useful campaign piece. I don't think he truly is some kind of pacifist. You'd associate that with more with the left wing, really, than your traditional sort of neocon conservative GOP. Part of the political establishment. But so my view has been, well, I don't think peace is what really drives MAGA Republicans particularly, and I think they're only saying that as a kind of, they're associating the Democrats with being the establishment. It's all about being anti-establishment. Now the Democrats have become the establishment in the US political arena, that if the establishment, a deep state, are going to war, then we're going to be against that. Yeah, we're all for peace, but actually it's this deeper idea of being against establishment and the deep state.
Other polling data at all points.
In other words, if Trump then goes to war on behalf of the United States or takes the US into war against Iran, actually most people in MAGA world, I think, would be fine with saying, yeah, no, it's a good idea. I'm following Trump rather than following peace.
It's in the same direction. Republicans are with Donald Trump on this particular issue, and they're with Donald Trump at large. And when you go against Donald Trump, you go down.
And thank you, Harry Enton. I swear he's going to put his back out one day. So the White House has apparently contacted Charlie Kirk and other MAGA propagandists to try to quell the online backlash to his involvement in the Israel-Iran war. Interesting. Fearing a backlash from his isolationist alliance supporters, White House officials have quietly reached out to the conservative influencers to explain Trump's possible shift away from diplomacy. Among those contacted was MAGA acolyte Charlie Kirk, who recently polled his conservative audience on whether the US should intervene. Nearly 90% said no. So there is this isolationist wing that is there. The question is whether that represents the Republicans at large and whether they would actually follow Trump or go against Trump if he did. You know, it's one thing to say, do you agree do you think the US should go and support Israel against Iran? And you say, yeah, no, yeah, okay, I can answer that question now. But then if Trump did actually do that, does that mean, do you go against Trump? And actually, I'm sure that many of them would just go back to Trump. And that's what the data seems to suggest. So nearly 90% of his audience, though, said no, the Journal reported Wednesday. Some prominent conservatives have toned down their rhetoric, but discontent has continued to burst into public view as longtime Trump supporters voiced concerns that the president is abandoning his campaign trail pledge to extract the US from foreign entanglements, according to the report. And I think, you know, what Trump says on the campaign and what he actually does they don't necessarily have to jive. Let's say that. And then Laura Loomer, who's supposedly been at the heart of some of these purges in the National Security Council, in the White House in general. Some are saying that actually she's involved even with foreign policy to do with striking Iran because she is of Jewish descent, even though she's like one of these far right people. It's a bit like Smotrich and Ben Gvir in Israel, who are part of the coalition government in Israel with Netanyahu, but those two are like at total right-wing extremists. And you think, well, they're Jewish. They can't be right-wing. You can't have right-wing Jewish extremists because look what happened in the Second World War. No, you can have people who are incredibly right-wing everywhere in the world, no matter what your society is. And Laura Loomer's one of those. Now, she apparently says, I wish I didn't have the displeasure of having to... There's two things she said. One is she has gone to town against Tucker Carlson. Right, to town. I won't show you one of her tweets because it's too offensive, but it's brilliant. It's not brilliant. Like, I'm not necessarily agreeing what she's saying. It's brilliant to see these people eat themselves, is kind of what I'm saying there. So it's kind of nice to see such a broadside against Tucker Carlson, even if, you know, Tucker Carlson could be ideologically right on this. Laura Loomer here then says, I wish I didn't have the displeasure of having to meet most of the people I've met in conservative media over the last 10 years. Literally the worst people you'll ever meet in your life. So she's not just going to town on like Tucker Carlson, she's going to town on most of the people in conservative media who she says are literally the worst people you'll ever meet. I don't know quite how to take that, because I would probably agree with her, but then I'm like, or maybe they're actually nice and you're the horrible one. So you can interpret that in several ways, right? So anyway, it's interesting that we're at a time where there are some fascinating fractures in the GOP and particularly in the MAGA GOP world. Anyway, that's enough from me. Take care. I'll speak to you soon. Toodle pips.